And one great way of doing that is stories. People love stories. So if you can put a story in there that talks about something where you had a struggle, there was a turning point, and how you overcome it, even if the story does not go the way you want to go, it shows the person that's listening to it something about you that is a very vulnerable, but in a very confident way. And that makes you memorable. And let's be honest, we remember people's stories sometimes more than we remember the person themselves. And that's going to make us stand out in our interview or with a client.
Live the life you love.
What's going on, y'all? Today's guest is Dr. Corinne Devin. Corinne is an orthodontist for the United States Navy and is currently based in Japan. And has an amazing journey. She has done so many amazing things. If you check out her LinkedIn profile, she's a spokesperson, ambassador, and leader, role model, public speaker for Miss United States organization. She's been a keynote speaker for their STEM conference, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. She was Miss Earth 2018, International Miss 2020, and has a lot of experience in public speaking, which is what we get into today. Like, how do you become a better public speaker? I hope you enjoy this conversation with the amazing Dr. Corinne Devin. Yeah, so you're in Japan, and it's a drastic time difference. So you're talking to us at 5 o'clock in the morning, your time. So thanks so much for waking up early for this.
I'm in the land of the rising sun, and greetings from the future. Or I should say Ohayo gozaimasu, which means good morning in Japanese.
What's life like in Japan, being over there, being stationed over in Japan?
Japan is a beautiful culture where, people here are they're very respectful, but they're also very quiet. And one thing I've definitely learned to appreciate with the Japanese is they make use of everything. I've never been in a country that has 12 different trash recycle bins, and you'll never find a piece of trash on the ground, but finding a trash can is almost nearly impossible. So it's a very, very sweet culture. And living here as American, I feel very, very blessed. Even with our current state, the Japanese have done a fantastic job really keeping the virus at a minimum here.
That's awesome. Japan is definitely one of my bucket list places. And I've mentioned to you in email, Okinawa is somewhere where I really want to go. And it's not because of Karate Kid. It's because of blue zones. I don't know if you're familiar with the blue zones, but Okinawa is one of those places where people are the healthiest and happiest and have pretty much a really long lifespan.
I believe it. The Japanese are very mindful about exercise. They walk everywhere. This is actually my second time living in Japan. The first time I lived in Tokyo, or in the Tokyo greater area, and I went through about 14 pairs of shoes. So in America, where we drive everywhere, in Japan, you literally walk everywhere, to the point where, even the people that repair your shoes will give you the big fat X, like, no more, you need to let them go. So it's a very mindful culture. And then here, there's no such really thing as organic, because just everything is grown from the ground. There's farmers markets, like just going to the local store. It's really, really a very safe, clean country. And I would tell your audience, if you ever decide to come, fall and spring are the two most beautiful times. So right now, depending on where you are, the cherry blossoms are starting to bloom, and it is truly magical. So end of March, beginning of April is the best time to come in the spring. Unfortunately, the weather is a bit fickle, so it just takes one good windstorm or rainstorm and they're completely gone. But you'll see these trees that you had no idea that would produce these flowers. It almost looks like snowflakes, but crystallized in time. So yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful country.
I love it. What an amazing way of life. I need to take my wife there, and so they can tell her, hey, these shoes, it's time to go, because she has lots of those. So just going through, we're going to speak about public speaking today, but before we dive into that, just going through your LinkedIn profile, you have lived already a very interesting life and have done so many amazing things. Tell everyone a little bit about you.
Well, I was actually born and raised in the Navy. So blonde hair, blue eyed. I was actually born in the Philippines, but I was born on a naval base. So I'm considered a naturalized citizen. And my father was a dentist in the Navy for about 20 years. So you would never, I guess, 8-year-old self that would believe that I would drink the Kool-Aid and join the military. So when my father retired, we moved to Reno, Nevada, and that's where I went to high school, but I quickly soon left for college. And in college, I actually majored in communications, and that's where I got kind of my first dose of public speaking. And it was also that time that I met a little girl. She was 8 years old, that really changed the trajectory of where I wanted to go next. That was dental school. And after going to a private college in California where my parents helped me out, but I had no car, no cell phone, no luxuries, lived on campus, ate dorm food, walked everywhere. The fact of getting another, $400,000 student loan just seemed really daunting. And so that is where I actually applied and got a scholarship through the Navy, and the Army and the Air Force both offer this. I'm happy to give people these options, and that's something that can be done across the board. I see it for nursing, engineering, JAGs. And of course, depending on the time in the community you're applying to, the amount of scholarship money does vary year by year. They will say in the needs of the Navy, but I know that's the same for both the Army and the Air Force. And then I came in the military in 2007. And since then, it has been a whirlwind journey of I've moved 7 times in the last 14 years. But I've also got to visit over 50 countries. Before Japan, I actually lived in Italy. I was there during the pandemic, and actually moved during the pandemic from Italy all the way to Japan. And since then, I've just been really blessed along the way of doing some really great hobbies that the military has been okay with. And again, I say these are my views and not the views of the Department of Defense. And all the hobbies or activities I do on my own time, just like I'm talking to you before I go to work this morning. And so one thing I want to share with your audience is that if you have something that you're excited about and passionate about, you will make time for it. You will find a way to work around it. And you'll also get really familiar on what you can and can't do. And working for the largest corporation in the world, I have definitely had some people who've cheered me along the way. I've definitely had some obstacles in my way. But if anything, when you have your heart in the right place, you want to serve others, you want to help people, and in turn, you are going to help yourself. That is where I've got to where I'm at today. So I'm now a commander in the Navy. I do public speaking. And even during the pandemic, I've loved doing podcasts and listening to one like yours, because in a world where now we can't get together for conferences, hopefully not for too much longer, this has been a great way for me to meet and connect with people all over the world.
Speaking of conferences, have you experimented with Clubhouse yet? Or are you familiar with Clubhouse?
I haven't, but I've recently heard about it. Recently, my international pageant director, Laura Clark, was on one, and I was hoping to listen in, but I didn't realize you had to listen live. So the time zone change, to your audience, just to give you guys a perspective, I am about 14 hours ahead of Chris in the future. So that's the only thing, is that sometimes when these podcasts go on, it's about 2:00 in the morning my time, and that's where I just have to draw the line that I need to sleep.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm curious how big Clubhouse is in Japan or in other places, but it's really cool. Like when you're on there, you literally have people from all over the world in these rooms. Like I'll be on, I hear people from somewhere like in South Africa or in the UK and Netherlands and Australia. It's really cool to really be able to network and connect with people from all over the world through Clubhouse. It's a definitely cool app. Twitter has just launched like a beta test for their competition for Clubhouse. So yeah, that'll probably be coming out really soon. So speaking of being an orthodontist and in the Navy, and I think you were a dentist in the Navy first, right? What is your training like to join the Navy? Like, I'm a big fan of Jocko Willink, and he talks about this crazy Navy SEAL training all the time. I'm sure it's not that intense, but what is training for someone going into the medical field like?
Great question. And you are 100% right. Navy SEAL training is very, very different than any other training in the Navy. So in the community I'm in, it's called Staff Corps, and you have Staff Corps and you have line officers. And just to give your audience kind of some background information, line officers are the pilots. They're the people that maybe went to JROTC, that went to the academy, they come into the Navy, and like they'll work on like a ship, and they could be in different places. So they're kind of a jack of all trades. If think of a surface warfare officer, that's like an example of a line officer. And then you have staff officers. So staff officers are your lawyers, your doctors, your physicians, your nurses, your nuclear physicists. So the military hired them on for like a specific job, like their brain, to come in. And where you can kind of see the line being drawn is, let's say I'm on a raft stranded in the middle of nowhere. I'm a commander, and there might be someone on board who's an ensign. Well, I'm an 05, they're an 01, but they will actually, as a line officer, they'll kind of take charge of command. Because let's be honest, I don't run a ship. I don't do a lot of those exercises. My domain is a very small environment called the mouth. So very, very, very different. But as far as the training we go through, they have like a 9-week training officer school, and then they may have different schools depending if they specialize in certain areas. For me, it was 6 weeks of officer indoctrination school. It's now called Officer Development School, and it's located in Newport, Rhode Island, where we did exercises called the Buttercup, where they threw us on a boat in a pool, and we had to figure out how to plug all the holes, and we had to jump in the water in our uniform. And even though I'm in the Navy, I am not a strong swimmer. One of my goals is to get back into swimming. But it's just something that I just don't do regularly. But the things we do regularly is we have uniform inspections twice a year. So we have to get in our dress blues or our summer whites, which is nearly impossible to keep a white uniform clean more than 5 minutes. It's all white down to the shoes,
Oh, wow.
may I mention. And then you also have to do a physical fitness test. Our physical fitness tests actually have been delayed during COVID, but it is our job to maintain good physical shape. And that's a number of push-ups. We're now doing planks instead of crunchies. And for your cardio, it's either running, biking, swimming. And that is just required for us to do. And, knock on wood, I have to say, I still fit in the same uniform I got in officer school in 2005. So I have the Navy to thank too, how they definitely put physical fitness as part of our day-to-day activities. But I'm very lucky. I get to wear scrubs most of the time. And so my job doesn't involve being in uniform. But if I was more of in a leadership capacity, or if I was serving on a ship like some of my colleagues do, or we're off on deployments, which I've done, that's when you'll see us be more in the fatigues or the shipboard uniforms.
I love it. I could probably ask you so many questions and do a whole podcast just on that. But
sure.
we're gonna stick to the public speaking today. But before I get to that, since it is a music podcast, if we kind of go off topic from music, I kind of always ask a couple music questions. So just some fun ones. What is the first concert that you've ever been to, or the first memorable concert experience?
I would say the first memorable concert I went to was I saw Third Eye Blind, and that was actually with my friends at a live concert. And I can't remember how we did this, but we were standing up for something like 8 or 9 hours straight of just outside in a summer hot one day in Reno, Nevada. And I don't even know how we did it. And it was something we were home from. It was something like we just graduated from high school, and it was the first concert that our parents would actually go. I actually wanted to go to see Smashing Pumpkins when they were big back when I was a freshman, but parents wouldn't let me go with my friends and their older brother. So yeah, that was an experience just to really feel the beat and the heart of the music. I miss concerts. I can't wait for those to come back.
Same. Yeah. What is the first album you've ever bought?
The first album I ever bought. Oh gosh. Great question. I would have to say it was probably Boyz II Men. A lot of my friends and I, we just love Boyz II Men. Like it was, Motown Philly, Saying Heart. It's so hard to say goodbye to yesterday. There were so many. It's a toss between that and Mariah Carey. I think that was something that I all loved growing up.
To me, that's like the prime of the R&B days. I love it.
Yeah,
definitely had all those records too. So getting into public speaking, let me start with kind of a vague question and we'll dial it in from there. But why is it important for people to become better public speakers?
We all have gifts. We all have a message that we want to portray to the world. And when you become very good at what you say and how you say it, it will only improve the impact of your message. And what I mean by that is that if I started saying and yeah, and wouldn't make eye contact, you would be distracted by those things and not focus on what I'm actually saying. And for me, those are such easy but critical things to fix, that when you actually do speak, people are going to remember how you make them feel. They're going to listen to your message and hold on to that. And let's be honest, what makes us feel good? It makes us feel good when people acknowledge us, they repeat back to us what we said, and they appreciate it, how we made them feel. And so to me, learning how to be a good public speaker and getting your message across makes you feel that regardless if this is a deal, regardless if you're trying to sell someone something, regardless if you're trying to build a connection, you knew that you gave it 110% and that you would have not done it any other way, because you didn't have one of those little things chipping away what you were actually discussing with that person or group of people.
Tell me about the first time you gave a public speech, and what was it that made you want to become a better speaker?
Wow, great question. I would say the time that I remembered where I really had to go into public speaking was actually in college. Being a communications major, one of the courses I took was oral communication. And I went to St. Mary's College, where you would walk into class and they would tell you not even God gets an A. really tough
Wow.
teachers, tough brothers, tough priests. And my professor would sit in the back of the room and would have this little like notepad and a little pen where he would put a check next to your name. At first, we didn't know what it was until I dove into the syllabus and realized that anytime you did something that violated one of his rules, saying, yeah, you didn't make eye contact, you mispronounced your word, he would write a check mark, and he literally was docking your grade of your speech over and over and over. And at first it was very traumatic. I think we all got something in the 30s and 50s of a percentage with our first speech, which was just us talking about ourselves. And then we had to do 9 different types of public speaking. But one public speaking that I did, I remembered you couldn't say a single word. You had to portray a message all with your body language, all through visuals, nothing nonverbal. And then afterwards, if the audience could describe what you did, that would determine the level of your grade, like A, B, C, D, or F.
Sounds intense. I wish that everyone had to take such a like intense public speaking course, but it sounds also intimidating. Not even God gets an A.
Yes, it wasn't. It was very, very intimidating. And there was also a sliding grade scale. So an A is not a 90. An A, I think for him was like a 94. So it was definitely intimidating, but I really enjoyed it. And it really forced you to break some of those habits that you didn't realize you do. And maybe there's certain words you repeat that you would use kind of as a safe word or a word that's kind of a crutch for you. It forced you to break those habits. So for me, it was a really good start into public speaking.
Yeah. Public speaking is one of the biggest fears for a lot of people. And before going into like the structure of a speech or a pitch, so I'll include pitching because I know a lot of people in the music industry maybe more doing pitching than speaking. But how can someone overcome their fear or anxiety to speak in front of an audience?
Well, first I would ask them, what is it exactly about public speaking that bothers them? Is it the fact of having all the attention on them? Is it the environment? Is it the people, the fact that they feel they have so much at stake? Let's hone in on exactly what it is. So there is things that people can do. So if someone tells me it's the environment, then what I'm going to tell you is let's practice in that environment. Maybe you can't go to that exact boardroom, but let's get in a boardroom. Let's grab people to sit in. If it's looking at people and feeling you looking at reflection yourself, then guess what? We're going to start having you speak in front of a mirror. There's little tactics that you can do along the way that may not completely eliminate that fear. Every person who does a public speech has some sort of anxiety. And if they say they don't, they're lying. I'm going to put that right out there. Even some of the best motivational speakers out there. But let's be honest, these people who we admire, who we feel are successful, did not take the easy route to get there. That was them failing numerous times or feeling like they were failing until they realize it just takes practice. It just takes time. And it takes some good coaches and mentors to like tell them the tough stuff that maybe their friends or family wouldn't tell them to get better. And for me, that was what I was doing. I was constantly putting myself in a place of being uncomfortable because that's where you're going to get good at something. And those would be the areas that I would tell people to focus on. It's tough. Absolutely. If public speaking was easy, oh my gosh, there'd be so many better public speakers.
Yeah, for sure.
But let's think about what are the things that you want to get good at public speaking. And let's also think about the industry, because I would agree with you. Being a public speaker in probably the music industry is probably very different than being a public speaker in education or being a public speaker for me in the military.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of being a public speaker in different scenarios, what if someone's listening and they're like, well, I'm not really going to ever give a speech anywhere. I'm not going to pitch anything. I'm not going to be a YouTuber or a podcaster. Like, what are some of the benefits for just everyday life? Why public speaking would help anyone or be beneficial to anyone?
Well, I would ask you, what are some of your goals? What is the job that you're trying to achieve? Because there's going to be a time where you are going to ask someone for their help, or you're going to reach out to a job and do an interview. And even if your interview is just one-on-one, that is public speaking in a sense of that you have to impress that person. You have to be genuine, authentic, engaging. If you think about public speaking in the sense of interviewing, let's say for a job, because all of us are going to need jobs. We can be honest about that, whether we're working for ourselves and having to pitch to another company or a client, or we're working for someone else. We all have to do it. what's going to make you memorable than the next 50 people walking in the room? What's going to make that board think about you and not the thousands of others or the distractions they have in the world every single day? And being a good public speaker is something you have 100% control over. So let's at least maximize that capability.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that, the interviewing part too, because it is a presentation and you are pitching yourself and you're trying to convince someone that you're a good candidate for the job. And the other thing too, I don't know if you have any advice on this, but you never really know how long a job interview might last going into it. It could be an hour, it could be 5 minutes. And one of my last interviews was a 5-minute interview. And when I walked out of it, I was like, man, I really wish I would have done this differently. And a friend of mine said, since you never know how long an interview is, almost treat it like a politician. Like, don't answer the direct question. Like, just give your strongest pitch right out of the gate. I don't. You have any thoughts to that or any insight to that?
I actually know what it's like to do that because as a woman who competes in pageants, many of my interviews with judges where I'm competing against hundreds of women are only 3 to 5 minutes. Wow. And so I would treat every interview of, what is the one thing I want that person to know, or what are the top 3 things I want to know, and find a way to insert that in the conversation. And the way you get good at that is practice. And I have a coach, and I have many, many coaches and many, many mentors that I use to help pull that out of me. It's almost like dusting the files off of in your brain. And one great way of doing that is stories. People love stories. So if you can put a story in there that talks about something where you had a struggle, there was a turning point, and how you overcome it, even if the story does not go the way you want to go, it shows the person that's listening to it something about you that is a very vulnerable, but in a very confident way. And that makes you memorable. And let's be honest, we remember people's stories sometimes more than we remember the person themselves. And that's going to make us stand out in our interview or with a client.
Absolutely. Yeah. One thing I always say is, and I mean, it relates to everything, but I say it about the music industry. Music is the last thing that matters until people hear it. And then it's the only thing that matters. So you have to lead people to the music. And the way you do that is with stories and brand. If you have a good story and a good brand, people are going to want to hear the music. And I feel like that relates to like all fields, everything. So when it comes to preparing for a speech or a pitch, where do you begin, or for an interview? Like, do you put together an outline, of bullet points? Like, what does that I guess initial prep look like?
Well, first off, I ask, myself, who is my audience? Because who I'm speaking to is really going to change the outline of my speech. And then also, if I know how much time I'm speaking for, that's also going to dictate my outline, as well as if there are certain topics. So I will be honest, right now, I actually have a very big speech I'm planning for the American Association of Orthodontists. They've asked me to be a keynote speaker and discuss about leadership and women in the military as women in orthodontics. Most of your audience may not know this, but the military, U.S. military, only makes up about 18%. And in my rank, it's only 0.29%.
Wow.
And so I like that for me is really going to dictate my outline and then how much time they want me to speak. Now, if you know that you're only going to be speaking to one person, that's going to be much different preparation than speaking to 100 people, or in my case, speaking to a few thousand people, which is still a little unnerving, even to someone like me. But I will tell you one thing that I did for probably one of my biggest speeches or biggest talks was for the Department of Defense. I did a speech for a group of young middle school girls, and preparing a talk for about 1,000 middle school girls was really challenging, because I had to think, all right, I need to figure out how to get this girl's attention within the first 30 seconds, and then also how to keep their attention. And so what I did in my outline is I started just writing down an outline and bullet points of what are some of the highlights I want to get. And then from there, I started writing down some key facts. And then from there, I also would write out my speech, but then look at ways of transitioning. So yes, you're right. I do start out with an outline. I do start out with some bullet points and some highlights, because let's be honest, once you have your outline done, then you can kind of reference back to make sure you don't take a detour or go off on a tangent, that you really can stay focused and making sure you get your message across. The other thing that I would tell your students or anyone here that's doing public speaking is that once you have that out, really seek out a coach, seek out someone who's got experience in this, who can really iron things out and give you some tough love. Because sometimes what makes sense in our heads or what makes sense to us when we speak it may not communicate well to others, because what's more frustrating is thinking that you're saying a message, but no one's understanding it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I've been a big proponent of. I hope one day when we're allowed to do TED Talks in person, that is something I'd love to do, because you have to learn how to deliver a message. And for example, with TED Talks, you have to do it within 12 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So your message may be something very simple that you give a couple examples to, and that's all you have time for. This is not an hour-long speech. If it was an hour-long speech, guess what? It would be a completely different outline. So knowing those constraints will really help dictate how you do your speech.
Mm-hmm. What would your TED Talk be about?
Well, my TED Talk is about achieving the unattainable and how to change the game along the way. So it's something I've actually wrote up last year during quarantine. I was hoping that 2021 would allow me to travel, but right now, being in the military, I am not allowed to leave Japan without extenuating circumstances. And so as more and more of our world gets vaccinated, I'm hoping that the TED Talks do return. And once they do, I'm definitely ready to apply full force.
That's awesome. Looking forward to seeing that.
Thank you.
Going back to the structure of the presentation, right, or the public speech, whatever it is, what advice do you have for the open and close? Because I know the open and close is something that can really get someone's attention or the audience's attention. Maybe more to open than the close, right? But does you reconnect the close with the open? Like, what advice do you have on opening and closing? And one thing I always tell the students too is to avoid starting a presentation with, "Hi, my name is Chris. Today I'm going to tell you guys about podcasting." I feel like that's one of the worst ways to start. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that and just on open and closes in general.
That's great advice that you're telling your students. I would even tell your students to start it off with a story. Let's be honest, stories are great. If you can master the art of telling a really great story that embodies your message, people will relate. They'll be initially intrigued, and they're going to want to hear, how does the story end?
Mm-hmm.
What happens next? And so that's a really great way to open your talk. People already know who you are. It's written down a brochure. It's on a big PowerPoint slide behind you. Right. You don't need to introduce yourself.
Exactly.
What you need to do is get straight to the point. And then you're going to just go in more detail and really unwind it and allow people digest it in your speech. And then for closing, bring it back together and remind them of what they said in the beginning, because now they've been focused on all these little details that hopefully you're drawing, you're guiding them down a road that you're eventually going to circle back and really conclude at the end of that one thing you want them to remember the most, because they're not going to remember every single thing in your speech unless they are taking notes or recording it. They're just not. So it's, what is that final point that you want to drive home? And that's what you would conclude with.
Mm-hmm. And you also talked about transitions. So the way I was taught public speaking, my course in college, it wasn't as intense as yours, but they taught us kind of a very basic outline where it's a memorable open, then you have focus, so that you focus from your open to what your topic is going to be about. Then you have your 3 bullet points, and then your close, and then transitions between the bullet points. Do you have any tips on transitions?
Transitions are very tricky. I will be honest. It's something that I even struggle with myself. So what I would tell you is that when you're doing your outline, you have to think of kind of what is the overall theme here. Are we talking about, for me, dentistry? Are we talking about pageants? Are we talking about a certain niche in the music business? Because transitions are going to be the thing that's the connecting, maybe the first story or the first struggle to the second struggle, or the first point to the second point. And so it's almost, if it's taking that overlying theme and kind of inserting it, that will be the bridge between first point and second point. So that's what I've always reminded myself. And it goes no different when I'm writing. I would tell people, for me, what helps me with a lot of my public speaking is I write it out or I type it out, because then I can print it. I can look on a piece of paper. I can take a break and come back, and I can even show it to other people who I respect their opinion and be like, does this make sense? Because if it can make sense written down and the transition makes sense, it's going to be much more crystal clear when you actually speak it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You have any advice on storytelling? Like, what if someone feels like they're just not a good storyteller? Like, what advice would you give them to? And some people tell stories and they're sometimes not very interesting, or just like a lot of long tangents. Like, how can someone become a better storyteller? Any tips, or like what to research, or how to like just get better at that craft?
There is so much good good knowledge on the internet, but I would definitely say if you Google TED Talks and storytelling, there is several people out there. I don't know the names of them off the top of my head, but there is one lady, her name is Kimberly Will from Strategic Samurai, and she does a fantastic course on storytelling. And, full disclosure, I don't have any financial interest, but she was a coach of mine. She's someone I've kept in touch with. And she talks about 5 points about talking about the shift, the struggle, the point where you kind of have this aha moment, and then the success. And so if you think about those points in each of those stories, in your story, you're going to make sure to have a good story. Now, the thing with stories is you can stretch them out. You can make them super long and super detailed. But I would tell you, depending on your audience and depending how you have your time, you can have a story that can be really condensed in just a few minutes. And so I would make sure that you have that one story, that story that really grips and a lot of people can relate to in different versions. And I have that with some of my own stories. There are some stories I can stretch out to very, very long and others that are very condensed for those 5-minute interviews versus that hour-long interview. Mm-hmm. And most people are like, well, how does that apply to you even in the military? Like, where would you even do it? And I'll give you a great example. So as an orthodontist in the Navy, my patients who are active duty sailors, Marines, and the kids and the spouses, these guys catch bullets for me. These women and men who serve our country, like, it's my honor to take care of them, but they actually have to get permission from their boss to get braces. Oh. And I remember this one time I had a patient, I just couldn't get it through and I couldn't understand why. He met all the criteria. So I threw in my uniform. I went to his boss's office. He was a Navy SEAL, but he was an instructor. So he was not, going off to save the world, doing some crazy mission that's some top secret. And I went into his office and I told his XO that I wanted to know why he would not sign this form. And he said, Doc, you've got 10 minutes. And I looked at him and I said, I only need 1. That's all I said. I was prepared to go into all these scientific reasons that would probably lose him. He started laughing. I was in his office for 30 minutes. He signed the form. But where I'm going with this is, again, I just told you something where you felt like, oh my gosh, like, what's going to happen next? Something's on the line. So it's something that's engaging, something that's exciting. And if you don't know if it's engaging or exciting, practice. Mm-hmm. Who is a good person to practice to? Well, I know right now we're not able to see a lot of people, but guess what? You still have to go grocery shopping. You still have to go to the bank. You still have to go to the pharmacy. You may still have to go to the hospital, hopefully just routine, not for serious things. Yeah. Practice on someone you're waiting with. Practice with that nurse. Practice with that cashier. Because if you can do something like that and get their attention, a perfect stranger, that is a great way to know that if your story did exactly what it was intended to do.
Mm-hmm. So this sounds like your story is kind of quick, right? So when people think of stories, like, okay, like I only have a 3 to 5 minute pitch or interview or presentation, like how am I going to tell a story in that short amount of time? I guess, how much time on average, what you suggest does the story take up, or what percentage of that time does the story take up?
Anywhere between 30 seconds to a minute.
Okay. Even if it's when it's that short, 3 to 5 minutes?
Yeah. Even if it's that short, because again, what are people going to remember about you? They're going to remember how you made them feel, and they're going to remember that story. So if that story embodies the message you want to get across, that story is almost like that nail in that coffin for you.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Because even when you're like pitching something, you really go into like the stats and the numbers, and you're trying to like really sell something, right? And almost kind of in a way begging to like work with a person, whatever, or have work with a partner, whatever it is. But yeah, I feel like that story, I mean, most people don't even think about that. And especially with a quick pitch, like there might not be any story at all. And it's that one person that comes in with a story that's going to be remembered over the ones that just fill their 3 minutes of time with a bunch of stats that they can just look up.
Yeah, because stories make us human, and they say a lot of traits about you. So the story I just gave, what does it say? Wow, this woman is confident. She knows her stuff. She's not afraid to walk into some place and put her reputation on line. Did I say any of that? No, I didn't say any of that in my story, but those were the meanings. Those were things you could extract from the story. So think about what your story says about you, who you are, if you're a hard worker, if you're driven, if you're passionate, because I imagine many of your students or many of these people who are going into such a competitive but rewarding industry about what they're willing to do, if that story can embody it, it's kind of like your way of bragging about yourself, but you're not saying those things. Those are things that you as the interviewer, or you as the person sitting on the other side of the table, are like, wow, like I'm just so impressed by them. It's kind of like Albert Einstein. He didn't go around and say, hi people, I'm Albert Einstein, I'm a really smart person. No, he talked about the things, he showed people the things he did and the things he came up with that exuberated that confidence, that exuberated that intelligence and that genius. And so that's the beautiful thing about stories of what they can do. They're a way of bragging about who we are, but doing much more in a subtle way and not so much in a conceited way.
Yeah, I love it. When you're preparing for a presentation, like when you're practicing, how much should you practice, or how do you know when you're ready to give a presentation? And does that differ from when it's a 3 to 5 minute presentation versus an hour? Because practicing an hour presentation, of course, can take way more time.
Absolutely. Preparing for an hour-long presentation is definitely much more, a lot of more practice and a lot more preparation. So I would say preparing for my 3 to 5 minute talks are something where I'll do a lot of speed questions, where I will have people ask me different things about different areas. And even though the question content is how I'm going to answer it may be very similar, having people ask me different questions about different areas really will test me on my knowledge. Because if I can explain it in a very short amount of time, then I know that material well. I know it through and through. And why is that important? It's almost like a dancer who does a routine, or an artist that does a song. There's going to be a time where you're going to forget a word or you're going to slip, and it's how you recover very quickly that no one even knows except for you, mm-hmm. that you're really well prepared. So that's how I prepare for something short. As far as something longer goes, that is something where I've done index cards, and that's more of just a comfort thing for myself. That's where I will try to go into the environment, and I will do it almost every single day. So I am someone, when it comes to whether it's public speaking or when it comes to taking a test, I do a little bit each day. Or if I have something that's, much further in advance, I have something that's about 9 months in advance, I actually will work on it on a weekly basis and just a little bit of time. So that way it doesn't feel so overwhelming, because we all get burnt out. We all get frustrated. We all get tired of working on it. But if we just focus on a small section of what we need to do and then just kind of revisit, it will kind of keep that momentum going. Because let's be honest, it's the marathon that's going to win the race, not the short sprint for something that long of a speech.
I love the thing with the questions and like really knowing the topic, because you're so right when you said, when you mess up a word or say something wrong, like the only one that knows is you. So it's almost like you have to practice on just going. Just keep it going, keep the flow going, because if you mess up, the audience doesn't know. But if you know the topic well enough, it's almost like you can ad lib or fill in the gap until you get back to on track where you're trying to be. Is that sound about right?
Absolutely. 100% right, Chris.
Awesome. And then how do you get better at speaking? I mean, I always say it's all about reps, like with most things in life, like practice makes you better. Like where can you, because like if you are just practicing in your room or in front of a mirror, like the only person like that can say you're getting better is really just you. Are there any groups out there, or you mentioned coaches a few times, like how can someone become a better public speaker?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I believe Coffee Masters, I apologize if I'm butchering their name. It's been a long time, but there's different social groups that I do know that do public speaking groups that you can be part of. I'm a member of Junior League. My membership is on frozen while I'm deployed here in Japan, but they actually have multiple academies and multiple ways for people to engage and apply. And I would definitely challenge people to look at their community organizations, even their church, and look for opportunities to speak. Even you standing in front of a group of people, and depending on your faith, if you're reading a sermon or if you're teaching a course to small kids, that is a way of public speaking. And the more you do it, you get better. Being in the military, very often I compare things to either cars or gyms, even though I'm not a car person per se, because I want people to relate that if you go to the gym once, are you in great shape? No. But if you go to the gym every single day, what's going to happen over time is you're going to eventually build muscles. It's just no different than changing your diet or changing your sleep. Those one little things is not going to make a difference. So public speaking, you just speaking in front of your mirror every single day is going to help, but it's not going to be the only thing. And so you have to find different little ways to challenge yourself. So that means changing your environment, changing who you're speaking to, changing your topic, learning to be a little more vulnerable, learning to share those stories over and over and over and over again. I mean, you could even say going on dates is public speaking, because you're speaking to a stranger that you're getting to know. Hopefully you don't make them feel like they're being interviewed, but at the same time, you are sharing stories. You are sharing about yourself and who you are. And by giving that part of yourself, that in some ways is a different form of public speaking. And that's the only way you're going to get better. Is it's just like anything. If you told a child who is learning to walk, sit down, don't worry about it, you'll figure out one day. They're never going to walk. What do? They keep getting back up. They keep getting back up over and over and over again. They'll get it. That's going to be the same way with you, with public speaking.
What was the group that you mentioned? Tell me a little more about that group. Was it like, is this something that's free? Is this something that you pay for membership?
So Junior League is something that you actually have to have a membership to join, but I would say, I believe it's Coffee Masters, and I apologize. I'll have to look it up.
Toastmasters?
Toastmasters. I'm so sorry. Coffee Masters. I apologize. Toastmasters. Yes. Thank you. That one, I do know they do have a fee to join the groups, but from what I've understood with Toastmasters, is that you could come to one session for free to see if it's good for you. And I would definitely challenge your audience, go to a couple different ones, because there might be some groups that you just feel instantly connected with and others that you don't. And you want to be with a group of people where you feel connected, but you also feel like they're going to push you. They're going to challenge you. It's like running a race. You don't want to run with someone who's running the same speed as you. You want to run with that person who's about a minute ahead of you. So that way you have something to look forward to and something to push you to get to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Toastmasters is great. The fee is super low. I think my chapter was like $120 for the year. And the great thing about that is I was always told, like by my parents and friends and teachers, like the people that, I mean, I guess you had a tough teacher, but like the people that are supposed to like almost like tell you, would expect to tell you, oh, you're doing such a good job. Like, they always tell me like I've been a good public speaker. And I was like, okay, well, I want to get better, especially since I'm podcasting, I'm teaching, and I need to find the Toastmasters group here. I moved since, and I was only part of it for a couple of months. But when I walked in the first time, I walked in with some confidence, like, okay, I'm a good public speaker. People have told me I'm a good public speaker. Those are the pros. When I heard them speak, I was like, whoa, I am like a 1 out of a scale of 1 through 100. Like, I was blown away by how well they speak, but it's very encouraging. Like, everyone's there like to encourage each other, help each other, help them with the structure of the speech. They have like different formats of speeches they have to give. And they do this scary thing called table topics, where you just have to like get up and speak about a random topic for a minute. So really, really great exercise to get those reps in, right?
Yeah, that's such a wonderful exercise to do. And it's something that I actually teach my military corpsmen. So I've done a couple of courses on public speaking for them. And that's one thing I actually have them do. I have them stand up for a minute, and they can talk about, I give them a little more latitude the first time. I tell them they can talk about anything. Some of them talk about travel, some of them talk about themselves, but it's a really good way just to break the ice. And the fact it's for a minute, it's short enough that they get a taste of it, but it's also long enough that it still keeps everyone's attention, because guess what? They know they're going next. So right. You better be nice to your colleague, because you're going to be the next person on the hot seat. Yeah.
I can only imagine what it might be like in the military, because some of my friends, they do not hold back with feedback.
That's good. Everyone can be a critic. So
yeah. when it comes to those public speaking also, right, too, because you're talked about being a motivational speaker, you talked about like changing how people feel and the way you make them feel when you public speak. I would assume something that's really important in public speaking is authenticity. Like, why is it important to be authentic, and how do you know if you're, I don't know if that's kind of a vague question or not a great question, but I'm kind of curious, like, how do you know someone's being authentic, or that you're being authentic?
Well, people can smell when you are not being genuine. They can definitely smell that out. And perhaps because I work with children, they, I think, are like the best forms of like seeing that a mile away. And I'm a horrible liar. I will never be a professional poker player, because bluffing would not be my forte. But I would definitely say, in order to be authentic, talk about stuff that talk about stories that happen to you, or that you feel very strongly about. Not saying stories that necessarily have to elicit emotion. Emotion's great, but sometimes you don't want the emotion to overwhelm you and take over your speech of what you're trying to say if you get too emotional. But when you talk about something that you are truly passionate about and that you truly care about, that's going to come through. And when you're not being authentic, people, if they don't smell it right away, if they don't see it right away, it's eventually going to come through. And if anything, it's going to disdain your reputation. So when it comes to public speaking, I always tell people, focus on the things, focus on the things that happen to you, because, we can't lie about our childhoods. We can't lie about the things where we felt like our world was turned upside down and that everything was going wrong and we don't know why. And it's just happening. But everyone's gone through that. Everyone, no one's had a perfect roller coaster ride. I mean, I went without my stuff for 6 months last year. And there was times I didn't even know about what airplane I was getting on or how it happened. They lost half of my household goods shipment coming here, but I knew I was going to get through, and it was just stuff. And to think that no one's ever lost anything or never had anything breaking, that person must have lived in a cave. So when it comes to being authentic, I tell people, talk about stuff that through and through, it's easy, it's effortless for you to talk about it. And then that way you always will be authentic.
Yes. So speaking of authenticity, I also learned that it's important if you're starting something like new, like a new venture, like let's say you're a content creator, you want to be a content creator, and you're starting a new venture. Let's say you're going into the music business or going into fitness. Being authentic, it's okay, right? I think an audience is forgiving if you admit, like, hey, I'm new to this, I'm learning this, so I'm here doing this because I'm a content creator and I love creating content, but I'm growing with you guys, like I'm growing with the audience. And I think if you don't know the topic well, I think people are forgiving if you admit that versus like faking it, because then that comes across as very inauthentic.
I could not agree more with that. I will tell you right now, I'm doing something that is completely brand new to me. I am writing a book.
Oh, cool.
And I don't know hardly anything about publishing. In fact, I have a book next to me that says The Essential Guide to About Publishing. And I am definitely a fish out of water. And I tell people, like, yeah, I'm writing a book, but gosh, I didn't even know where to begin. So I started just asking for help and asking a coach for help. And being honest with people and letting them know that your struggle up front, it's definitely much more forgiving, because then people are going to realize, like, okay, she just admitted she doesn't know everything, but she wants to learn more and she wants to engage. How am I supposed to fault that person if they already told me basically the biggest struggle they had up front? Like, you know what I mean? It's already out. And I would say learning to be humble and let go of my pride was something that didn't happen to me initially, especially growing up in the military, where you're supposed to be brave when you're scared inside and you're supposed to act confident when you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. But I would say even in residency, I remember very often my professors would ask me, or they were colonels in the Air Force, who would ask me, like, you don't know this? I'm like, sir, you're absolutely right. I don't know, but that is why I'm here. I got 365 days to become you, sir. And they're like, what else how can they criticize me at that point? Because it's like, I just told them I don't know anything and I want to learn.
Yeah, exactly.
So you, in some ways, I don't want to say you take away other people's power, but basically you're leaving yourself open as an open book to be like, okay, guess what? I'm here. I'm part of the journey. I want to explore. And hey, if you guys got any feedback along the way, I'd love to take it. And so, I think that's another way for your audience to feel engaged, but also to be like, wow, good for her. Like, or good for him. He's putting himself out there. He's on this journey. And hey, I want to be along the ride and maybe tell him some lessons I learned along the way. So that is something that I feel that we could all do. I may be a board certified orthodontist, but there's still so much about orthodontics that I don't know. And there's parts of orthodontics I never get to do. And I tell people that up front. But the other thing that I would also caveat with anything, whether it's music, content creation, is don't let that muddle your message of, yes, I don't know anything, but I'm here. I'm ready to work. I'm ready to put in the time. And I've got a pen and piece of paper ready to go to take notes of what I need to do to be like you or to be the best. What can I do now? Because I don't want that to muddle your message of your drive and your passion at the same time.
Yeah, I love it. It's funny when we said your story kind of sparked a memory of the movie 8 Mile. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but the movie with Eminem. But I love, like, towards at the end when he does like his very like last freestyle in the freestyle competition, he basically like just disses himself. Like, he talks horrible about himself, like everything that the other person could potentially say, and then like throws the mic at him and says, now tell them something that they really don't know about me. And I don't know, just kind of really made me think of that scene where, he put it all out there.
He took away their power. He basically said everything up front and be like, hi, this is who I am. I'm not perfect. I'm flawed. And this is where I'm from. And this is what I'm going to go ahead and do. Okay. Your turn. Go. Yeah, absolutely. I have done that in the military. I have acknowledged, shortfalls. I've acknowledged things where I see problems, and then I offer some solutions. I'm like, all right, sir, let me know what do you see next? And that is a great way to take control of a conversation or take control of a situation. But it's also very humbling because you are admitting up front what's wrong or what needs to be improved or your shortcomings. But at the same time, you're doing it in a confident, vulnerable way of also acknowledging, yeah, I know this isn't right, but this is what I want to do to fix it. Hey, you got some solutions? Hey, I'm ready to listen. Let's move forward.
Mhm.
So it is a great way to not only sell a client, but also to gain business and respect of others if you can do that up front. It says a lot about who you are as a person.
Mhm. Speaking of saying something up front, kind of a little bit of a personal question, but I feel like a lot of people might be able to connect with that. Like before we started recording, I told you about that I have Tourette's and that I might make like a little nasally or vocal sound here and there. And when it comes to public speaking, like if there's someone in a similar situation, they have Tourette's or some other kind of disability, rather than being like judged about what they have, do you think it's important, or you think it's maybe a good idea to share like what they have like somewhere upfront in a presentation, or what scenarios would that be I guess appropriate for?
Well, if it's definitely a speech that's going to be more than 3 or 5 minutes or an area where it's going to come out, then I would say acknowledge it up front.
Mhm.
I would definitely say there's a couple times in my talks and my speeches where I have acknowledged things up front, like, gosh, it's great to be here, but man, who else is really nervous right now? Or who else is kind of scared to be like on a stage? Like, how many of you would feel nervous if you were in my place on stage? And it's almost kind of just acknowledging the elephant in the room
Mhm.
and just admitting up front. And then, people kind of laugh about it. And I think that just brings a little levity to the conversation. Like, okay, whew,
Yeah.
got that out of the way.
Mhm.
And again, that's another great way to bring a story or say something that's common that most people can relate to. Because let's be honest, we all have some sort of crutch. We all have some sort of weakness or something that we feel very insecure about. And if we can just acknowledge about our front, not only does it make you much more relatable, but it makes you likable. And in some ways, it makes you much more of an attractive person because it's like, okay, gosh, here, I thought this person was totally perfect. And they're not. They're just like me. Like, and now I'm much more engaged and I'm much more interested to learn about him or her or want to hear more about what they're telling me about or the company, their industry, or whatever they're selling. So yeah,
Yeah, it's another great way to
definitely
connect with
acknowledge
people.
it.
I know we're about out of time. I know you have to go, and I'm about to lose my babysitter, aka my mom. But is there anything that I missed? Like I'm far from a professional public speaker or a TED talker, so I kind of just did my best effort to kind of prepare for the interview to kind of give the audience an idea of how to structure their presentations, maybe how to get a little bit better. Is there anything I missed that you feel like they should know?
I by no means consider myself a professional public speaker. I have not ever gotten paid actually to do public speaking. So I just want to put that full disclaimer out there. It's more of like I got asked to do it because of my pageant background or being in the military or being in such a small niche in the military. But what I would tell you is to your audience is that never underestimate the value of what you do. Never take for granted something that comes to you easy, because I don't care if someone is born with a natural talent, unless they actually work on that talent and constantly find ways to be challenged, they will never grow. You will be much further and faster than someone who was just naturally a good public speaker. So when it comes to speaking, when it comes to any of your passions, I would tell people that if you truly want to get better at something, find mentors, find coaches.
Mm.
I would tell you, and don't feel like you have to be locked into one person for the rest of your life. There is people who I've outgrown in my career. Right now, I'm at a pivotal point in my own career where I'm actually having to say goodbye to some of my mentors who are retiring from the Navy in this year, next year, and find some new people and ask them, I mean, how does it feel to almost feel like you're having the breakup talk, even though we're not breaking up per se, that, hey, listen, I admire where you are and I want to get there. And I know you're leaving the military. So who are some people that you know who can push me in area X, Y, and Z? And that is something I will tell you. It takes a village to raise a child. So why would you think it would be any different to get to where you are, success in life, and also pay that forward? Because we all started somewhere. We all had certain things that were just given to us or came naturally to us, and other things we had to work hard for. And I guarantee you, we all know people in our life who are struggling with one of those areas. And the best way to pay that forward is help that person in the area. So that is something that I really stress to your audience that I enjoy doing, because as much as I get out of mentoring, other people is how much I get out of my mentors myself.
I love that. And then you have, as I mentioned earlier, you have like a very interesting background, very interesting story. And we only went into that like a little bit today. We probably could have done a 3-hour long episode just to get to know you. Where can people go to learn more about you and what it is that you're up to?
Yes, absolutely. So I am on social media. You can find me on Instagram at Dr. Corinne Devin, and that's DrCorinne. I also have a public Facebook page, Dr. Corinne Devin, as well as YouTube and LinkedIn. And if your audience has any questions about public speaking, life in the Navy, being an orthodontist, being a pageant queen, you can reach me on any of those platforms, or you can also email me at drcorinnedevin@gmail.com. And I would be delighted to answer any or all of their questions. And thank you so much for having me, Chris.
Yeah,
I
sure.
really wish you and your family safe travels. Hopefully people are getting better and cured and vaccinated back in the United States.
Thank you. Thank you. And then before I ask you the last question, I ask everyone, thank you also for taking the time, for reaching out, and for wanting to share your story and tips and advice on public speaking with our audience. And also thank you for your service in our military and for our soldiers, and for putting your life on hold and at risk for to defend us over here in the United States. So it's just thanks for what you do.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I love what I do. I feel really blessed with my job. So the pleasure's all mine. Thank you.
And then the question I ask everyone at the end is, what's your definition of making it?
For me, the definition of making it is when you realize, after waking up all those early mornings and getting to that point of that success of where you're just like, wow, I did it. For me, it was passing my boards for orthodontics and just looking at a small, probably 10-cent piece of paper with my name on it, that I did it. That was 11 years of sacrifice and struggles all made it. So for me, it's not only achieving that goal, but it's hitting those little markers across the way of where you're just getting closer and closer and closer there. So for me, that is true success.